All right, everybody, welcome back. RCT Construction. This is Houston Pleasant episode 2. Still feeling a little bit under the weather, so if my voice is extra annoying, I do apologize for that. Anyway, in this episode, we're going to go ahead and get kicked off by working on the front gate for this park. And by front gate, I mean we're going to do like the security checkpoint. We're going to do the ticket windows, and then the main entry point for the park. And then we're going to do a little bit of a main street as well. So originally I kind of had a different idea for how I was going to do it. As you can see, I redid the path a couple times, and then we're going to go ahead and drop on into working on the kind of security checkpoint. And this is potentially also where you could be purchasing your tickets for your day at the park. Took me a couple tries to get it to a point where I liked the way it turned out. You can see here I did this style window, which I think ended up being the final result, and then I switched up so the beige was more green, so it blended in with the grass a little bit better. I kind of did that in the Iron Horse construction, and I really liked the way that turned out for the tunnel for that ride, so I decided why not repurpose it and reuse it for this one. As far as the aesthetic for this part of the entrance goes, I kind of tried to use the same style I did for the parking lot and the parking checkpoint. So we're going to do kind of that truss style. I zoom out a couple times to go look at the parking window and recreate it as close as I can. It's not the prettiest structure I've ever built, but it does its job, and I think it looks kind of okay. As far as Houston Pleasant goes, it's going to look a little bit different at the front than Funland or Joyland do because, it's 30 years newer, or about 20. I think this would be 27 years, but when construction starts, but the park is going to open in 2000. So the park itself opens 30 years after Funland did, 29 years after Joyland did. So that's the first checkpoint where you could buy your tickets, get to go through security screening, and this is going to be the actual main entrance where your tickets are scanned. So I started here. We end up getting a nice couple lanes there. So we have, I believe, 5 lanes that guests can go through. And then I wanted to put maybe a little guest services kind of spot on either end there. Just in case guests have any issues scanning their tickets, they have a place they can go to go speak to a representative, because believe it or not, when you go to parks, not everybody is super happy when they go through the gate, and sometimes they want someone to talk to after they go in. But this building is going to end up looking fairly plain. When I do buildings, I try to get a little bit of a base there so it looks like it maybe has a little bit of foundation work before it starts going up. So rather than just being a wall sticking up out of the ground, I want to try to get a little bit of texture there on the ground as well to get a little bit of building texture going. I already said that once, but I'll say it again. Why not? Here we go with the wall. We're going to end up sticking a door on the side there. We're going to stick doors in the back so the employees can access all of these buildings. And we're going to get a couple windows in there, and that would kind of be the guest services area on the far side of the ticket windows there. I may go back. Upon watching this, I might go back and add a door on the front as well so guests can access it through the front, just in case they'd have something going on the outside. So I start with gray roofs. That will end up changing to be the tan or brown ones, just because I have more scenery pieces that match the brown than I do the gray. I tend to like the look of the gray style more, but the brown color I think looks fine as well. It actually, I think, gives off a lot more color in the long run. So this building ends up, one thing I do when I'm building buildings, they end up looking very, very square, and this one is no exception to that rule. So we have a very square looking building, and I wasn't sure, partway through construction of this main gate here, I almost thought about ripping it down and starting from scratch, but in the back of my mind I just went, look, let's put it together, put some texture on it, and see what it looks like at the very end before I commit to that. And I think at the end it ended up looking okay. Still a very boxy kind of building, but I think all in all it ends up looking just fine. I don't have any horribly big issues with it. I think it looks pretty darn solid, especially after we add these kind of signs on the end, a couple for exit, and then a couple to welcome the guests into the park. So I'm just going to use some walls for a little bit of extra texture on the end, use the tile inspector to make those kind of line up with the walls properly. I still cannot figure out right or left when it comes to setting those walls. I'm sure there's an easy way to figure it out, but I still haven't done that. So it is what it is. I'll try once and then do it again. Then we'll get these signs figured out. It took me a couple tries to figure out really what I really wanted to put there, but I think I ended up looking pretty okay. And then on the back side there for the X, I was originally going to make those red, but red is a very angry color, and I really didn't want, you don't want guests being angry on the way out. You want to make sure they try to come back. When it comes to theme parks, you're in the business of repeat visitation, so you really want to make sure that they have a good time and want to come back to visit your park again. So we'll put a little bit of foliage in there, and I think once we get to the point where we can hire staff, I'm going to put some handymen in there to mow that grass just so it looks kind of nice. At Funland and Joyland, I do have a couple handymen that mow the grass along the main part around the mountain, so it looks fresh every time guests come in. Every other spot, I really don't care how long the grass gets. In-game, I think it adds a little bit texture to the ground, so that's no big deal. So we'll flatten some of that land out so we can kind of get it started here, and we'll get going on building the main gate. So we're going to put a little pond on the other side like we do have there at the front end with that little bridge going over. We're going to do the same thing on the inside with a couple of fountains, kind of give a nice little pleasant area. And then we're going to get started on some of our main street buildings here. So we'll start with just a little spot, and I want to kind of use the same idea we have going on over at Funland and Joyland. A fun fact about Funland and Joyland, we have one side that has food, and then we have one side that has kind of souvenirs. This park, as I got further in, kind of ended up meshing the two ideas together. But a fun fact about the main gates there at Funland and Joyland is they're actually flip-flopped. So the food and the souvenirs are on opposite sides at those two parks. As you saw there, I was kind of debating on where I wanted to put the info kiosk. I thought about putting it right there in the middle, but I figure since we have a nice opening there for that building, we'll just plop it in there. When it comes to the info kiosks, I really like to try to use all windows, because with the info kiosk, you can have a window on each side. And I like to try to use all of them, but I ended up not doing that here. And I just used the main window. The final color for the buildings are going to match the main gate, so we're going to have white walls on the front. And we're going to kind of change it the further in we go to kind of match some of the food places we end up going with. So on the right-hand side, when you come in, is going to be the food. And then the left-hand side is going to end up being... the left-hand side is going to end up being the food. And the right-hand side is going to end up being where the souvenirs are. I can't remember if it's Funland or Joyland that's lined up like that. But we'll have it set up like that. And then as far as souvenirs go, I wanted to make sure there was something for everybody. And then I've said it before, the main color for this park is orange. So Funland is blue, Joyland is yellow, and then Houston Pleasant is going to be orange. So we're going to have orange t-shirts, orange balloons, and orange hats, and eventually orange umbrellas through that info kiosk, and then a souvenir stall as well for our guests to get the kind of basic souvenirs for the park there. And then right there was originally going to be the end of the building, although I ended up expanding it a little bit further because the Main Street area ended up getting a little bit more involved than I thought it was going to be, which I kind of think might cause some problems in the future when it comes to expansion. However, I did end up leaving myself right behind the gate there a nice expansion plot there so I can send the path out so guests don't get stuck there. Because as I was going, I went, oh crap, the further out these buildings go, the further back I have to start putting the attractions in, because as guests will start to look for that, they could potentially get caught in some of these buildings. But I did leave myself a nice little out. You can see there at the bottom of the screen towards the front gate, which was a nice convenient thing for me there. So we'll do the kind of the orange texture at the front of the park. Each building is going to be the exact same. They're just going to be mirrored on the other side. Excuse me, I know I mentioned it earlier, but I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather. I apologize for that. little bit annoying, but it is what it is. Add a little bit of texture there with the fencing on the building, and then we're gonna repaint some of those. And I repaint them a few times just until I found something I liked. Um, One thing I've mentioned before when it comes to stuff like this, it's always just trial and error. Do something, see if you like it, let it sit for a little bit, and then if you don't, try again. Even in these videos in RCT Construction, I finished some things for the video, but I've gone back off camera and kind of changed it a little bit to a point where I liked it. However, I'm pretty happy with the way Main Street here turned out. So unless we get further in expansion in the future, I think the areas for this park are pretty well set up front anyway, until we get into some of the more themed sections of the park in future episodes. So we'll have a little bit of a coffee shop up first. There's a lot of parks I go to that have like a Starbucks or a Caribou up front. Valley Fair had a Caribou, they don't anymore. But a lot of the Cedar Fair, now Six Flags parks, have a coffee shop right up front. So if guests are getting there in the morning, they can grab a coffee or something on the way. Universal does the same thing, Islands of Adventure, and at USF, there's a coffee shop right up front. So you can get your caffeine fix through your coffee or tea right out of the gate when you get in there. So I figure we might as well do the same thing here. And then now with each of these buildings, I kind of wanted to get a little bit of a balcony on each side. So each building will have a balcony up front. And potentially what you could do, if this was a real park, you could hire entertainers to put up there and get set, maybe do a show. But, you know, in-game, I'm not going to do that. And then right here in the center with the food stalls, we kind of wanted to put a little bit of a food court right here in the middle so guests could have a seat and potentially get some shade. So we're going to set these up. I can't remember. I got this idea from a YouTuber, and I cannot for the life of me remember who it was. It might have been Fluxtrance, but I can't remember for sure. So that's who I'm going to give the credit to right now. But if I find out later, I will definitely try to give that person a shout out. But I think it was Fluxtrance that kind of set those up. So you set those right there. You get some of the curve-based blocks, and you can kind of set up the little shades where guests can sit and eat. Now on the other side there, we're going to put an ice cream stand, because who doesn't want to get ice cream right up front? That idea rips straight out of Kings Island, and then Adventureland as well. I know those parks. Kings Island goes the same for Kings Dominion. I haven't been to Canada's Wonderland, but I'm fairly certain they probably also have an ice cream stand up front as well. Because who doesn't want to get ice cream on the way out? And then with that in mind, we're going to put a cookie stand right next to the ice cream stand. So you can have your option of dessert on the way out. You know the kids will love to drag the parents to grab them a sweet treat on the way out. And then on the other side, we're going to get a little bit creative here and kind of switch the merchandise around. So you can get umbrellas at the info kiosk on the far side, or you can get them at the souvenir stall on the other side. So when it starts raining and guests want to spend their $20, they can now do that on either side of the park. And then across from the cookie stand, we're going to have a donut shop. So on the coffee shop side, you can also go to the far end there and grab a donut. As far as in-game goes, having this many food stands right next to each other, probably not the best idea. You really only need one food stand, because what happens when you have this many right next to each other is they're going to kind of dilute themselves. You'll have guests kind of split themselves between, but you're still going to incur all the operating costs for each of the food stands. So for an in-game, for realism, that's great. For in-game purposes, probably not ideal, but I did want some shops around to kind of fill out the space on the front gate. Now, as far as making these kind of blend in, we're going to want to texture some of the areas around the stands. We'll switch up the colors a little bit. When it comes to the ice cream stand, you saw I kind of did more cream colors, cream and brown. And then as far as the souvenir stall here, we're going to kind of match it to the park's main theme, because you want all your Houston Pleasant merchandise right up front. So when the park closes at night, guests can stop and grab some stuff on the way out. And I'm trying to match all these kind of buildings to the color of the food stand at the bottom. And we're using kind of a forced perspective here, where when you look up, you see kind of different style buildings, but it is mirrored on either side. So each building is going to be the exact same, just mirrored across from each other. But you got cookies on one side, donuts on the other, and now it's just kind of filling the building out. I tried to get it in a spot where it looked nice. Again, my structures tend to look very boxy. I really need to break that habit and kind of try to get a little bit more out of that. But when it comes to a lot of those custom sceneries, I usually don't have the patience to kind of sit and put like the quarter blocks in, because this took me about 2 hours. And then if I do the quarter blocks, I mean, you can almost double, if not quadruple that time for the size of the blocks. So turning a 2 hour project into a 8 hour one didn't really sound like a great idea to me, but there's some people that do an excellent job with that stuff. We're gonna go ahead and get the roof finished off here. I textured the inside of those ones because there was a roof there and I could not get the outside texture in, but that does end up changing because I'm going to use the tile inspector to kind of outline the building and tilt those wall pieces so it matches a little bit better there. And then we're going to put some more color in there to match the building, and the more color you get, just kind of the better it looks. When you get guests coming in the park, you want to kind of wow them right off the bat. We'll get color all over the place. Again, using that forced perspective, giving guests plenty of things to look at. I just got back from a trip to Universal, and I'm someone that when I visit a park, I like to get from point A to point B, so I tend to walk pretty fast. But when you go to a park like Universal, you get a lot of people that visit that park, you know, that's their destination, that's kind of the trip of a lifetime, and it's really cool to watch those guests look everywhere. And in the time, I tend to find it really annoying because, like I said, I like to get from point A to point B, and you have all these guests that go around and love to look at everything, so they'll kind of wander off and wander side to side in the path I'm trying to walk. But after that's complete, when I'm done for the day, it really kind of gives you that sense of wonder and wow, because you want those guests looking around. You want your guests doing that because it gives them, you know, there's so many things to look at that you might miss some certain things. Anyway, we're going to get some fencing around the water, around the fountains. We're going to put some flowers in the middle there. There is a roof piece I missed. I don't know how I did that, but I did go back and get that placed, so you don't have to worry. It does end up getting fixed, and it is there. Actually, I fixed that right before recording this voiceover. So it is complete now. I tried a couple times to end this video, but there were a couple things I would see that I wanted to go in and fix. So the back of the building looked really plain, so I added just a little bit of texture there. And that could potentially change as well as time goes on. But that should just about wrap up our RCT construction for the main street and front gate here at Houston Pleasant. Getting some foliage placed. But thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate your time, and I will see you in episode 3 when we start working on the theme sections. See you later.